Hi everybody. I wanted to show you how to use the run button and run checkbox and some layouts in order to be able to create an interface. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a thing called the layout example, which is located in Book Examples chapter 18, Swing, AWT. Let's run it. We'll start with the demo. This is the FlowLayout. So with the FlowLayout, the preferred size for each button is taken from the font metrics that are contained in the button. And if you resize, you can see how things get relayed out by the layout manager in a fairly automatic fashion. It's quite pleasing to the eye from the point of view of a correct size. Once you have a correct size, things are working. I've rigged it so that each one of the run elements knows how to run itself. So this one will say on, off. And the same thing will be happening here. And if I click on the cancel button, it says, oh, look, you clicked. So we've linked actions to the appearance of the buttons, and you can see how they resize when you change the text. That's because the preferred size causes a change in layout. So to see how that sort of thing works, what we do is we take a look at the FlowLayout example. I type Control B in IntelliJ. That takes me to the definition, and you can see what's going on. We have a very simple system that essentially makes a frame, gets the content pane, and gives us a container, sets the layout using the so-called FlowLayout, and then writes a little for loop with 100 buttons. Each time you get a button, it's a run button or a checkbox button, and you put in some sort of text label. Here's an example of a run button being created for you using an anonymous inner class, and what it does is it just sets its text to click whenever you click on it. Similarly, we have a checkbox, a run checkbox. We'll create a new instance of that, and whenever somebody checks it, we'll get the value, and the value will be true if it's checked, and it'll be false if it's not, and then we'll just set our text value to be on or off. So it's not really doing very much, but it is doing something, and it's linked directly to an action. And the rest of it is handled by the layout manager. FlowLayout will lay out left to right, top to bottom, and use the preferred size for each one of the components. Once we set the size, the initial size can be anything we like. For example, if we think maybe 800 is a good height, then the next time we run it, it'll come out as a 800 pixel tall display, which we might still like to resize a little bit. And then that's our flow layout. Our next example is what I would call the grid layout. Now, grid layout ignores the preferred size of the components and forces a size so that each component will fit into an appropriate size. So here you can see we've created a layout with 3 rows and as many columns as will fit. We go left to right, top to bottom, and now we've got an OK cancel button with the same behavior, but look at the size. They're all square. It's ignored the text inside of the button. So now when we look at the grid layout example, we can see there's 3 rows, and to make as many columns as you like, you set columns equal to 0, and you put in your grid layout, and now you can add your run buttons and set your size up. And that's your grid layout. Very common layout, very useful for doing things like touch tone buttons, things like this. Let's try a different one. Here's a border layout. Border layout is a favored layout for many people. With border layout, what we'll do is we'll have north, south, east, west, and center. And in the south, I've put a little dial panel, and you can click on the dial panel. Here is a couple buttons in the center, east, and this is essentially dividing up your area in a manner that presumably gives that south panel an amount of space which is equal to the amount that is preferred by the containers or the components in that panel. So that's kind of an interesting border layout. It's kind of an interesting layout. Nesting layouts inside of border layout, like here we have this panel inside of the border layout, is a common technique. So let's take a look. Border layout essentially says, okay, we're going to get a run button, and we could have easily just said get run button and then just put in north. Here's a dial panel which we got. Now we could do get run button east. And here's one we'll do get run button center. And then we have get run button west. And now when you run the example, you should see the same behavior. You can see the dot 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 in here because it doesn't quite fit, but if you resize, it comes in. So then the question becomes, all right, what's this dial panel? And the dial panel just has some dial buttons in it. And you could put some run buttons if you like. Here we're adding a J button. But suppose I just said get run button, and we'll just call it dial 1. And then we could do the same thing over in here. And in here. And now we've got these interesting and wonderful buttons. Dial 1, dial 2, dial 3. And now when you click on these buttons, they should actually tell you that they've been clicked. So the behavior has changed. But the outward appearance is the same. And we're using a grid layout, so we put them all in the same column. And we can have as many rows as we like. We could just as easily have changed that around and gotten a different behavior. Let's take a look at another one. That's border layout. So we've seen grid layout, flow layout, border layout. Let's try this preferred size grid layout. That's the one that I've been authoring for a little while. Preferred size grid layout. And so that does grid layout, but it lets you keep the preferred size of your buttons, which is a little bit different from normal grid layout. Let's see what happens when you take a look at the preferred size grid layout. And so now we see here are some buttons. It's not using the get button interface, so let's do get button, or perhaps it's get run button. Oh, this is in a different class. Aha! So we better just leave it alone, unless we want to make reference to the layout example. So the run button doesn't actually do anything, but we could probably put something in there if we like. Let's see. Let's print hi there. Now when you type the OK button, it will print on the console. And it says hi there. Isn't that fun? So then we've got the cancel button, and when we set our layout to preferred size grid layout, it's still a grid layout using exactly 2 columns with a difference. And the difference is it uses the preferred size of each of the components and keeps that preferred size. So that may be something that you might like to use in the future, and it also gives you a good example of how to write your own layout. Now let's see a more complex layout. We'll try the so-called address book layout. So here in the address book layout, we've got some text fields in the center, dial buttons on either side. You can still click on the dial buttons, that's fine, but now you've got a text field and you can put in some stuff. So then the question is, okay, well, how did you do that, right? And maybe you can guess. There's a center, an east, and a west. This must be a border layout, and sure enough, it is. When you add a panel to a content pane, if you use border layout east, typically it's because you've set your layout to border layout. Now, I don't happen to see that here, but it's a good bet that you should do that. So set layout to be new border layout. Make sure that still works. And sure enough, it does. Yeah, formally speaking, you should definitely do that. So now you've got your phone number panel and dial panels on the east and west. Here's your phone number panel in the center. For the phone number panel, we just put in some text fields. Now, theoretically, you could put in a run text field. In fact, you could probably you could write a little method. And that'll return a run text field. That's available for Swing or AWT. And then what you do is you return new run text field. And your run text field can take a string, or it can take a size. In fact, what we can do is we can take a look and see what kind of things it can take. And it looks like it can take an integer for columns, which might be very convenient for us. And we'll get the value and print it for the run text field. If there is a value, if there's something in there, it'll print. Now when we call get run text field, we can actually see the run text field in action. And there we go. When we hit enter, something happens. And that's how you use the Project Imperion Run Components. Hope you like my little demo. Thank you for your time. Boy.